So fishing grass in the summertime to find bass can really be frustrating, especially when you're getting out on lakes that have deeper grass. But one of the best ways to do it is by picking up a crankbait and covering some water along those grass edges. And in today's video, I'm going to break down exactly how to utilize a crankbait, what you need to figure out where those fish are going to be at, and how to go about targeting. So stay tuned, we're going to get into it. So like I said, those fish getting out on those deep grass edges can be kind of a pain in the neck to figure out where they're going to be. But I like to break out a crankbait because all you have to do is figure out where one of those fish is, because that's where the group or the majority of the fish are going to be. And all I want to do is get one or two of them to fire to let me know that they're there. And the best way to do that is to go as fast as I can and then go back through with some other baits that I'm going to talk about at the end of this video, so you don't want to miss that. So what I'm going to do first is you have to beef up your gear a little bit. Normally you like to throw your crankbaits on parabolic bend rods that are going to move, be real flimsy, so those fish load up on it really nice. That's not the case in the summertime. In the summertime, when I'm cranking these grass, I like to go to a straight graphite rod. I don't like the fiberglass because it loads up too much and then you can't free the grass off of your bait. So I go to a straight graphite rod. This is a 7.2 medium fast action. This is an Arc Invoker Pro, and I like that because it has a faster snap with that graphite, and that little bit longer length, that 7.2, gives me a little bit more castability and a little bit more reach and be able to snap that bait free of that grass. You also want to beef up your line a little bit, because remember, before when you were throwing a crankbait, you were relying on it to hit the bottom to trigger those fish. You're not doing that anymore. Now I'm relying on it ripping free from that grass in order to get those strikes. And so normally I'd throw a crankbait on 10, 12 pound test, maybe even 8 if you guys are really bold. Now I'm going to be throwing it on like 15 to 17 pound line, because if you hook a giant in that grass, which you very well could, you're going to want to be able to get them free. And if you're throwing your stereotypical size line, you're just not going to be able to do it. So that's the gear that I'm going to beef this up with, and that is the first thing you're going to do. The second thing you need to do is figure out where those fish are going to set up. And you can go down these grass edges and just blindly throw a crankbait, and you'll catch fish eventually, but you're going to waste a lot of time doing it. So what I really like to do is spend some time behind my fish finders and figure out where the key areas are in that grass. And there's a couple key things that you're going to look for. It's going to look for like the same thing you're looking for when you're trying to flip the grass. You want to look for areas with hard bottom, you know, rock mixed in, and points and irregularities. The biggest thing I like to do is find the biggest flat on the lake and figure out where it necks down. If you're out there in the spawn and you know where those fish are spawning, this is a great way to figure out where those fish are going to go, because you literally just have to draw a line out into deeper water and get as close to that deep water as you can, and then find the nearest available grass edge. Generally these stretches are pretty short once you get into those areas, and so knowing where they spawned is a great way to figure out how to catch them once they get out onto those grass edges. But once you get out there, then you just spend some time behind your fish finders and find the key irregularities within those areas, and that's going to be your best friend, because that's going to allow you to set up on those spots just a little bit better and a little bit faster, because these grass edges are not all just a straight path. Generally there's spots where it cuts in, there's points where it comes out, there's areas that it's thicker, there's areas where it's thinner, and typically you're looking for those areas where it's real thick and then it thins out and there's rock mixed in, because that's going to be ideal. That grass can't grow through that rock, so that's going to create open holes in that grass, and that's where those fish are going to set up to ambush any of the bait that's traveling through that grass. And so that's the key areas that you're going to want to look for. Now what we have to do is we have to get set up on that spot. What I like to do is I like to position myself downwind and cast into the wind. And I know what you're saying, casting into the wind can be kind of a pain in the butt, but I've been throwing an arc gravity lately and I haven't had a single issue throwing it into the wind. So just get your reel tuned right, get the settings on it tuned right, and that will really clear up any of those problems, because a lot of these crankbaits are a little bit heavier, so you can really bomb those a little bit, and you have to have the right crankbaits for this setup. But first, let's talk about how to get positioned on it. So like I said, downwind, casting up into it, and what I want to do is I want to position my boat on the edge of that grass line. And you like to make straight casts into that grass, because if you start going into the thicker areas and pulling it out, you're not going to be able to do it as well. And so it's just going to get bogged up, that line's going to go into the grass, get caught, and you're going to be fighting it more than you're actually helping yourself catch fish. So you want to line up on the edge of that grass and really just cast straight down the edge of it. Generally what I like to do is I use my Panoptics or my 360 to really help myself line up. But if you don't have that, what you can do is just idle the grass edge, make zigzags in and out then you can put a waypoint on the edge of that grass every 20 yards or something like that, and that way when you're on your front graph you can look at your waypoints and see, okay, this is the straight edge right here. So that way you don't have to have all the fancy electronics and you can still go catch fish without having to look at them with Panoptics. So you're lined up, you have your cast ready. Now what you got to do is you have to have the right baits for the job. And so what you want to do is, if you're fishing 10 feet of water, I like to have a crankbait that runs like 6 to 8. Maybe even 5 to 7, somewhere in that area. You're not looking for a crankbait that's going to rip through the bottom. That's not what you're trying to do, because in these areas a lot of times there's a lot of moss on the bottom. The grass is thickest at the bottom, and so those fish aren't usually sitting straight on the bottom anyway. So that's not what you're primarily trying to do. That's not your reaction strike this time. Your reaction is going to come from ripping it through that grass and fishing a crankbait that will run midway through that grass. You want something that is in that mid depth to lower third. Something in that general region is going to be your best bet. So whatever crankbait that is that works for you, ideally pick that. If you like the DT series by Rapala, pick the DT series. I personally like the 6 cent C series, so I throw a C6 a ton. If you've watched any of my videos, you've seen a ton of fish catches come from this bait, and I will have all of this gear linked down below like I always do. So if you guys are curious and you want to get some gear, that's where it's going to be down below. And every time you guys click on something and buy something, that directly helps me. So that's not just me trying to throw gear at you for sponsors, that's also a little benefit to me. So I know it sounds pretty simple, just throwing your crankbait and reeling it right back, but getting the motion down for fishing a crankbait through grass can sometimes be kind of difficult. It's not just as easy as throw it out and reel it back, because you're going to get stuck in the grass, which is why we talked about beefing the gear up earlier, because that's going to be really, really important going into this next step. What you have to do is you have to figure out how to get that crankbait to come through that grass appropriately. And what I mean by that is sometimes you might have to snap your rod, sometimes you might have to pull it, let it flutter up, and pull it, almost like you would fish a Carolina rig. You have to get the actions figured out that it's going to allow you to get that crankbait to be most efficient going through that particular area, and that's how you're going to be able to cover water efficiently. If you're making a cast and every single time you make that cast you're bringing back a wad of grass, either you need to change your lineup, or you need to change the crankbait you're throwing, or you need to change how you're fishing it. Because a lot of times what you can do is you can reel down really fast. You can either rip it up to get it to come up out of that grass, or you can pause it, let it float up, and reel it and snap it to get it to come back down and break free through that grass. But it's going to depend on a varying retrieve to get you to be able to get that crankbait to fish cleanly through that grass. And every cast isn't going to be clean, and you're going to get really, really frustrated, especially if you don't have the right gear for this. It is going to kick your butt over and over and over again. So you really need to make sure that you're positioning yourself in the right angle with the right gear, throwing the appropriate baits, or else you are not going to be able to do this at all. And you're going to be kicking yourself the entire time, and you're going to be saying to yourself, this John guy has no idea what he's talking about, and we don't want that. So now that you're set up and you have that right area figured out and you know where those fish are at, you found the key stretches of grass, get the right crankbaits, and now you have to figure out what color is going to work best for you. Typically this time of year, I like to go with a brighter color, because a lot of times if you're fishing in grass, there's usually an algae bloom going on, or that grass is a little bit darker, so those fish can't really see it. But if you're on a body of water that has super gin clear water, you might want to go to something that has a really natural translucent presence. And that's going to really be the difference maker, is figuring out what color is going to fire better for you. Because those fish don't just fire on any color. Figuring out what bait fish are in that body of water is going to be really, really key in helping you get more bites when you're out there. But really, I like to throw something that stands out, looks like a bait fish, and then has a chartreuse belly like this 6 cent C6 has. It's just a great bait that has a great color pattern for it, so it stands out. It does a great job with smallmouth too. That chartreuse belly really gets those fish fired up, especially if they're below it, because like I said, you want to fish that crankbait midway through that water column. And then you also want to make sure you have the right hooks on there. Generally, I always upgrade from the stock hooks that those baits come on, especially right now. You're going to be putting a lot of torque on those fish to get them out of that grass when you're fighting them, because they're going to get balled up in that grass. You're going to have to be really pulling on them. And so going with a hook that has a very good hook up ratio probably isn't the best bet. I like to go with something that has a triple grip style with that EWG bend on it, so it comes up and then hooks down, because you want to have a hook that when you hook those fish, they're yours. You don't want to have a nice little round bend on there that's going to hook them if they swipe at it, because you're gonna have a lot of fish swiping at it, but a lot of times these fish, when you break free from that grass, are gonna choke it. And so you have to have hooks that are gonna really hold that fish on there really, really well. And again, I'll have some trocar hooks that I really, really like linked down below. They have really, really razor sharp hooks that do a great job. Triple grips are also an amazing hook for that. I'll have all of that linked down below, because those hooks are gonna make or break you. I can't remember how many times I've been on a grass line with people and they're throwing the stock hooks that come on those crankbaits, and you just watch them lose fish after fish after fish. And when these fish get really grouped up, it's really important that you capitalize on every bite that you get, because if you're out there and you hook one of those fish and you lose it and it goes back into the school, it can either move the school or it can just shut them off entirely, especially this time of year. It's important when you get them fired up to make every cast count, because that's how you're going to get your numbers, that's how you're going to get your biggest fish to mess up. Everybody knows that this time of year you rely on reaction strikes, because these fish have seen so much pressure that a lot of times these fish just do not want to eat. So the more you can get those fish to react, the better off you're going to be, and the bigger fish you're going to find yourself catching. And there's really no better way to do that than with a crankbait, as we've seen Kevin Van Dam do for so many years. And so like I said, a crankbait is a great way to trigger these fish and find these fish on a grass edge, but after that sometimes those fish will slow down and you have to go back through with a cleanup bait. One really good cleanup bait that I really like to throw is going to be a drop shot. And I'm going to have a video linked up here where I break down everything you need to know about fishing a drop shot and how you can better catch more fish with it, fishing the exact way that I'm talking about. So if you like today's content and you want to learn a little bit more, go check that out. But thank you guys so much for watching. God bless. Smash that subscribe button to let me know you like the content. But God bless. Take care.